Hey guys, welcome back to the Crypto Corner. Today I wanted to start with a few quick disclaimers. One, I'm in no way a professional analyst of markets, nor am I invested in Bitcoin and attempting to persuade you in either direction. I am simply a hobbyist, for better terms, attempting to synthesize all the information that I have digested. So naturally there may be bias, but this is my attempt at full disclosure. A majority of this information coming from an article in which I will link down below. Let's go. Let's paint a picture here. Back in 2004, someone launched a website called fuckedgoogle.com, dedicated entirely to predicting the imminent demise of what is now the world's second biggest company by market capitalization. Needless to say, that site is no longer around, though the URL is still in use by a Japanese website. But you can go back to the Internet Archive and nostalgically see firsthand what one of the worst predictions ever made was. And just to paint more of a metaphor here, we had the Internet apocalypse that was supposed to happen on December 31st, 1999, and then of course the end of the world was first supposed to happen in May 2003, then later moved forward to December 21st, 2012, predicted by misinterpreting the meaning of the end of a cycle in the ancient Mayan calendar. I wanted to start with these examples to make clear that yes, I am fully aware of the conspiracy crazy labels that are attached to putting way too much significance on one single technological event. And with that being said, I am confidently stating the unreliable aphorism in that this time it's different. And I'll spend the rest of this video describing to you why. Sometime in mid-November, barring some truly miraculous reconciliation, a group of Bitcoin companies are going to launch a new version of the Bitcoin protocol that will split the blockchain into two parts. I'll make note that yes, it was originally said that this fork, hence the split in the blockchain, fork in the road, you gotta go this way or that way, was supposed to occur on November 1st, but in reality, the split will occur on block 494,764. Hence, it really depends on current usage rates, and it's impossible to predict the exact date. So new estimates conclude the 494,764th block will be created sometime around mid-November. This has been a topic of debate within the Bitcoin community for the last several months, but has been largely ignored by the rest of the tech world because this is not the first time this has happened. The Bitcoin chain has been hard forked at least 5 times, most recently last August when Bitcoin Cash, or BCC, launched. An event that was preceded by a great deal of wailing high stress, and like fucked Google, the naysayers were proven resoundingly wrong. Since BCC launched, the value of both chains has risen dramatically, at least when measured in US dollars. So then why is this any different? The new split scheduled to take place in mid-November is called Segwit2x. The Segwit part, which stands for Segregated Witness, refers to a new way of specifying transactions within a Bitcoin block to allow more transactions to fit within a single block, thus increasing the capacity of the entire network. Segwit is actually already up and running, having launched on August 24th. The launch was so smooth that no one outside the Bitcoin community even noticed. But the 2x part will almost certainly not be so smooth. To understand why requires digging a little bit deeper into both the technology and the politics of Bitcoin. To attempt to put simply, the 2x fork is going to launch without a feature called replay protection, which all previous forks included. Without replay protection, the blockchain will not divide itself cleanly into two chains the way all previous hard forks have. Instead, it will be a fight to the death between the 2x chain and the original chain, from which only one victor can emerge. So let's use a nice fork-in-the-road metaphor. Previously, forks have happened, and people can choose which way to go. And for metaphor's sake, we'll see that both roads kind of lead to the same place, and everything's fine. But now a new type of fork in the road happened, and all of the people as a group need to come up with a consensus on which road to take, in which after the road not chosen will be closed off, paved over, and never being able to be a road again. So there are 3 possibilities. Either 2x will win, or the original blockchain will win, or Bitcoin will descend into chaos from which it will likely not recover. The chances of the third outcome are high enough that if you own Bitcoin in any significant amount, you really should be thinking seriously about what your next move's going to be. Let's dig a little deeper. Bitcoin is a new way of conducting human affairs, fundamentally different in deep and interesting ways from anything that humanity has ever tried before. As such, it involves politics and psychology as much as it does technology. One of the reasons that the Segwit2x issue is difficult to define clearly is that it's rooted in a fundamental difference of opinion about what Bitcoin is, or at least what it should be. On one side are those who believe that Bitcoin is or should be money, or a currency, a medium of exchange, a competitor to the US dollar and the euro. On the other side are those who believe that it is a commodity, a store of value more similar to gold or oil. The design requirements on currencies and commodities are super different. Currencies provide liquidity and short-term price stability. The reason people agree to accept salaries of more or less fixed amounts paid in US dollars is because they have confidence that in that time that passes between when they agree to work for X amount of dollars and when they go to spend that money, it will be reliably and conveniently exchangeable for a particular number of gallons of milk or gasoline, and that the exchange rate between dollars and milk won't change much, at least in the short term, like weeks or months. Commodities, on the other hand, have some intrinsic value. A gallon of milk has value not only because you can sell it for money, but also because you can drink it or make cheese out of it. In general, the value of commodities is closely tied to their intrinsic value coupled to the law of supply and demand. But there are some exceptions. Gold, for example, is priced far above its intrinsic value. There are vast stores of gold in the world sitting in vaults for which people are willing to pay very good money, despite, indeed because of, the absolute certainty that nothing useful will ever be done with it. And why are people willing to overpay so easily? It's because gold is reliably scarce. The world's supply of gold is limited due to physics, and so the price of gold can be relied on to not suddenly drop in response to a suddenly overabundant supply. Because of this, gold can be used as a hedge against currency inflation, and that ability to be a hedge against inflation provides value above the fact that you can use gold to make jewelry or other material objects. Gold is not special in this regard. There's other commodities like silver, platinum, or land. It just happens to be that gold is the thing that is used for this purpose more than the alternatives because of history and social fashion. Let's relate it back. One of Bitcoin's central value propositions is that it is reliably scarce, just like gold is. The total number of Bitcoins is capped at 21 million. Some say an arbitrary number that Satoshi Nakamoto just pulled out of his hat. This limit is enforced not by physics but by mathematics. The Bitcoin algorithm has this number hard-coded into it, and that is what is supposed to guarantee that the supply is limited. As a competitor to gold, then, Bitcoin has a number of attractive features. The problem with gold as a store of value is that it's actually physical stuff. It's heavy, so it's difficult to move around, and it can be stolen. Bitcoin is pure scarcity, almost completely divorced from the physical world. The control of a Bitcoin wallet boils down to the knowledge of a few hundred bits of data, the secret key which you can write down on a piece of paper and put in your pocket. Or more commonly, you can store it in a specialized electronic device, which you can also fit in your pocket. You don't need an armored truck to move Bitcoins. All you need is an internet connection. As a value proposition, Bitcoin as commodity is quite compelling, and it's the reason that Bitcoin's market cap is approaching $100 billion. But there is another school of thought, which is that Bitcoin is or should be a currency rather than a commodity, primarily a medium of exchange rather than a store of value. For example, going to Starbucks and paying for your coffee in Bitcoin. The technical demands on a currency are very different from those of a commodity. Currencies have to be a lot more efficient than commodities. This is the reason that civilization switched from barter to currency in the first place. Settling transactions is a lot faster and cheaper with a currency. Small retail transactions in particular have to be very fast and efficient in order to be competitive. You don't want to have to pay a $10 transaction fee on a $5 purchase, and you don't want to have to wait for hours for transactions to be confirmed. Unfortunately, the design of Bitcoin has some limitations that mitigate its usefulness as a currency. In particular, the rate at which transactions can be processed is limited. A new block can be mined only about every 10 minutes or so, and the size of the block is also limited. Thus, Bitcoin has a hard limit not only on its supply, but also on the rate at which transactions can be processed. And that limit is currently much too low for Bitcoin to be a practical alternative to fiat currency. This problem has been recognized by the Bitcoin community for a very long time. The problem is that making any changes to Bitcoin is really hard, and this too is by design. At root, Bitcoin is a process for achieving distributed consensus, in particular a consensus about who owns what. But before you can use this process, you have to achieve a consensus about the process itself, and you can't use the blockchain to achieve that consensus. The whole thing can only be bootstrapped by the messy process of politics and human interaction. That's one of the reasons that it is actually remarkable that Bitcoin has gotten as far as it has. Note that it is not actually necessary for everyone to agree in order to make progress. There's plenty of altcoins out there as a result of groups of people disagreeing with some aspect of Bitcoin's design and launching alternatives. All of this is operating on the free market as it should be. It works because the lines between Bitcoin and altcoins are clear. There's a Bitcoin blockchain, and there is an Ethereum blockchain, and there is a Litecoin blockchain, each with its own community of miners, and they don't interfere with each other. And the reason they don't interfere with each other is that they are designed in such a way that transaction on one chain is only valid on that chain and cannot be replayed into any other chain. That is what replay protection does. It cleanly separates one chain from another by formatting all transactions in such a way that they're only valid on one chain or the other. And this is what is changing when that 494,764th block comes in mid-November. The seeds of this doomsday were planted last August when some members of the Bitcoin community endorsed a plan called the New York Agreement, or NYA, for increasing the capacity of the Bitcoin blockchain. The NYA was a two-step plan. The first step was to rearrange how data inside a block was represented so that more transactions could fit in a block. This is the segregated witness, or Segwit scheme that we mentioned earlier. That is up and running. One of the reasons there was not much response or even awareness that it happened is that Segwit is a backwards compatible chain, which means it requires no updating to Bitcoin wallets. In other words, no code changes. The second step was to double the size of a block. That is the 2x part of Segwit2x, and this is not a backwards compatible change. A block that is too large is invalid under the current rules, and so current code will reject such blocks. In order to maintain consensus after the adoption of 2x, everyone has to update their code. Otherwise, consensus will diverge. There will be one chain that includes 2x blocks and another chain which doesn't, and no obvious way to tell which one is the one true chain. In the past month or two, there have been frantic attempts by prominent members of the Bitcoin community to convince 2x advocates to add replay protection, thus making a clean break between the 2x chain and the original chain, the same way that the Bitcoin Cash fork did. The 2x advocates have refused, citing the NYA, and secure, at least apparently, in their belief that enough people will update their code, that there will be no doubt that the 2x is the one true chain. The anti-2xers, or if you prefer the pro-replay protectioners, counter that if the 2xers are wrong, it could completely destroy faith in the Bitcoin community. It's a game of chicken with literally billions of dollars on the line. The irony here is that everyone agrees that the capacity of the blockchain needs to be increased. The disagreement is over when and how. The 2xers argue that Bitcoin is already straining under the current demand, and something needs to be done sooner rather than later. Also, going back on the promise of the NYA would be a betrayal that would cause more problems than it solves. The anti-2xers argue that the NYA should not be binding because it was negotiated behind closed doors, and that a change of this magnitude needs to be more carefully considered before it's adopted. The elephant in the room is what many see as Bitcoin's core value proposition, the supply limit of the 21 million coins. This limit is often advertised as being inviolable or untouchable because it's mathematically enforced, but that is only true as long as everyone is running the code that enforces that limit. The $21 million coin limit is enforced by exactly the same mechanism that currently enforces the block size limit. If one can change, so can the other. So far, that argument has not seemed to dissuade the 2x advocates from proceeding. But to me, all that means is that someone just wants the ability to manipulate. They want and need power, maybe because they fear not being in control. It's unfortunate that it's almost hardwired in us to look for ways to manipulate others for power. In this case, an almost theoretically perfect decentralized network that has gained the trust of a lot of people and being a truly honest system is now being silently manipulated behind closed doors in order to take advantage of that trust. Again, I don't really have a preference on which side wins. I just hope that one does win in order for Bitcoin to not lose its stability and fall into mass chaos and become just a failed experiment, we need to come to a group consensus and choose one path. The future success of Bitcoin truly relies on this consensus. And one way or another, this will play out sometime in mid-November. Leave comments below on what you think is going to happen or should happen. Are you selling? Are you going to hold on? Will this be the end or just another Mayan calendar misinterpretation? I hope you learned something new, and as always, thanks for watching.